show you more little pieces.
Where is Catherine? Why isn't she here with us?
Hello, friends, and welcome back to the channel where diplomacy and royalty intertwine in ways that never fail to surprise. Today, we are unpacking a scene so delicate yet so electrifying, it has kept palace watchers buzzing and global commentators debating. It happened in a single breath, in a single question whispered inside Windsor Castle's royal library, yet it instantly became the story of an entire state visit. Let us set the scene. Windsor Castle stood bathing in soft September sunlight, its fortress walls holding a millennium of history, its manicured lawns gleaming in green sharpness. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wax polish on ancient wood and the faint trace of parchment preserved over centuries. Into this atmosphere glided First Lady Melania Trump, a figure well aware that her every glance, every phrase, every shift of posture would ripple across newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic. By her side, leading with composure born of decades under scrutiny, was Queen Camilla. Together they walked through one of the monarchy's most hallowed spaces, the Royal Library. Centuries upon centuries of manuscripts lined the towering oak shelves. Illuminated prayer books shimmered with gold leaf. Maps traced the rise and fall of the empire. Shakespeare folios whispered timeless words that once reached the desk of Elizabeth I. This setting was meant to symbolize soft power, cultural harmony, an elegant restitching of the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States. President Donald Trump's second state visit in mid-September 2025 had been promoted as a triumphant return, a moment to reinforce bonds after rocky years. There had been the pageantry of arrival, the thunder of a 21-gun salute, the scarlet-clad guards snapping to precision. There had been the long banquet tables of Windsor's St. George's Hall groaning under chandeliers, where both nations' leaders toasted partnership in words carefully polished by diplomats. But even the most meticulously planned state event can be undone or transformed by a moment of authenticity. As the First Lady and the Queen Consort paused beside a display case of devotional books, Melania tilted her head. Her voice was soft, accented by years spent bridging worlds, but it carried an unmistakable clarity. I was hoping Queen Catherine would be here. Where is she today? The silence that followed felt alive. Those who were present later recalled how even the dust motes paused midair. Members of the royal household staff glanced wordlessly at one another, eyes saying more than etiquette would ever permit. For a heartbeat, Camilla looked surprised. It was not the question itself that startled, but the phrasing. Queen Catherine. To some it sounded like a courtesy, to others like prophecy spoken without ceremony. Queen Camilla's pause was fleeting, her recovery flawless. She smiled gently, folded her hands, and replied, "Catherine is resting today, focusing on her family." Formally, an answer like any other. But the impact was seismic. Because Catherine, Princess of Wales, was not forgotten in absentia. On the contrary, her absence became the most commanding presence in that library. For Melania to ask about her and to call her queen was to say out loud what millions silently believe. Catherine is already the gravitational center of the monarchy, already crowned in the hearts of the people. To appreciate why this small exchange mattered so much, we must zoom out to the tapestry of history tightening around it. This was not a casual sideline trip. The September 2025 state visit was a deliberate statement by both governments and by Britain's monarchy. The United States and the United Kingdom had endured strain in earlier years, from trade disputes to political disagreements about security and climate policy. The visit was pitched as a restoration, a mending of fences, a breathing of life into the partnership that once weathered world wars side by side. King Charles III played his role with precision handshakes, military reviews, remarks of friendship that bridged tradition and modern political necessity. Queen Camilla infused warmth into the agenda, attending to details, narrating cultural treasures, offering her hostly humor. And Melania Trump arrived like a returning conductor stepping into a symphony that had always been hers to influence. Reserved in public, she understood the silent power of appearances. She knew that every tilt of her head, every smile, would be parsed instantly in both Washington and Windsor. So the design of the visit focused heavily on optics. Banquets dazzling in crystal, regiments gleaming in red, trees planted in soil as symbols of growth. The itinerary was balanced: outdoor moments where the public could glimpse their royals, indoor heritage where partnerships could be deepened behind walls. And of course, the starring role many expected was Catherine's. Princess of Wales, survivor, mother, cornerstone of the monarchy's future. It was her presence that cameras sought, her interaction with Melania that journalists longed to capture. Catherine's return to increased duty after a mission made her the hope of millions. She did appear early in the day, radiant in sky blue as she joined her family to welcome the American visitors. She laughed lightly with children at the scouting event. She bent easily toward crafts made by young hands, and cameras captured her hand brushing Melania's arm as they exchanged words of kindness. Those images alone lit up international front pages, tightening the association between the two women. But Catherine's schedule was limited, and deliberately so. Months earlier, she had reminded the world of her humanity, confessing in January 2025 that remission after chemotherapy was not a straight road back to normalcy, but a carefully navigated journey. Her public diary was measured, her balance of presence and absence intentional. Thus, as the First Lady walked into the royal library with Queen Camilla but without Catherine, to some it was expected protocol. To others it was strange, even glaring. For Melania, whose earlier warmth with Catherine had clearly sparked connection, the absence felt personal. And so came the question, where is Queen Catherine? At first glance, it might be tempting to label the query as a faux pas. The hierarchy of royalty is defined carefully. Addressing a Princess of Wales with the anticipatory title of Queen could be seen as premature, even impolite. But from another lens, it was truer than any other title. For Catherine's absence, that afternoon was not defined by etiquette. It was defined by her place at the center of public imagination. To ask after her in such a direct way affirmed that her presence is the standard against which all royal engagements are measured. The library, filled with centuries of royal memory, had never seemed quieter. Yet through silence, Catherine's absence became louder than any coronation fanfare. The woman who had redefined empathy within royalty, who had shared her health pains so openly, who had emerged still standing, still smiling, was once again at the center, precisely by not being there. That was the true shock. And although Queen Camilla answered smoothly, smiling warmly, the pause before her words spoke volumes. It captured not rivalry, but the awareness that succession is not only discussed behind closed doors. It exists always within the gaze of the public. Camilla represents continuity, yes, but Catherine embodies the future. When palace insiders planned the visit, they knew well that the cameras would linger longest not on the speeches of presidents or the formal handshakes of monarchs, but on the faces of the women who carry symbolic weight: the Queen Consort, the First Lady, and the Princess of Wales. In the modern age, diplomacy often happens less in policy papers and more in photographs. So the itinerary unfurled meticulously. After the outdoor welcome of uniforms and salutes, after the cheerful afternoon of crafts with scouts and a ceremonial tree planting, came the evening banquet. Inside St. George's Hall, the setting was a vision of grandeur practiced for generations. Chandeliers dripped light across vaults where royal crests gleamed in gold leaf. The table stretched farther than the eye could measure, covered in white linen starched rigidly, polished silver reflecting candle glow in 1,000 points of light. Each place setting was measured precisely by ruler, down to the angle of the dessert spoon, an invisible ballet of etiquette that had been rehearsed for days. Cups brimmed with vintage wine, poured by stewards in tailcoats who moved noiselessly behind the line of heads of state, generals, and dignitaries. At the top table, King Charles and Queen Camilla presided with practiced grace, flanked by their American guests. Charles, always dignified yet understated, raised his glass and toasted renewed bonds of enduring friendship. Camilla followed with a glimmer of wit about two countries divided by a common language, drawing laughter across the hall. The focus, however, was not only on speeches, but on appearances. Catherine was absent from the banquet, a deliberate choice. While once it might have provoked whispers of slights or rivalry, in this new chapter it read differently. A figure recovering her strength was allowed, finally, to prioritize wisely. Observers missed her, but they also respected her discernment. Melania Trump, dressed in ivory satin punctuated by diamond earrings, moved with polished calm through the hall. She posed for photographs, leaned close to Camilla across table talk, and exchanged softer smiles with the king. At several points her voice carried across, thanking the royal hosts for gentle kindness and welcome warmth. Diplomacy was alive, but always in the undercurrent. So was Catherine. To see why her name alone carried seismic weight, one must revisit the year before. In early 2024, when the announcement of her cancer shocked the world, Catherine had faced what seemed unbearable. The palace broke its usual silence to disclose the condition, and in March she herself revealed the truth in an unusually personal video message. She wore a pale sweater, sat plainly without grandeur, and spoke directly to the people. "There are days of strength and there are harder days," she admitted, "but I feel your prayers with me." The video spread across continents in hours, one of the most shared royal messages in recent history. Catherine had turned her illness into something larger than a medical update. She made it a mirror of humanity. Young mothers wrote her letters of encouragement. Cancer patients said they saw themselves in her confession of fear. Men and women from distant nations lit candles and vigils. From there, every public statement became precious. Updates in January 2025 brought cautious optimism, remission, gratitude to the Royal Marsden as well as medical teams that guided her. Still, she emphasized patience, admitting she was learning to accept uncertainty. Thus, when she began appearing again in limited royal duties later that year, these were not routine engagements. They were symbols of resilience. Each outing carried the message not that royalty is untouchable, but that royalty is human, fragile, and yet steady. Which is why, in September 2025, her selective presence mattered. Attendance at scouts, at ceremonial gardens, at moments framed by air and space was expected. But extended hours in the enclosed royal library? Out of kindness and practicality, that was avoided. And so a gap appeared. Into that gap fell Melania's question. Queen Catherine, the words heard around the globe. The phrasing revealed itself as more than curiosity. It was affirmation in disguise. For in international diplomacy, language matters. Titles especially carry thunder. Melania could have referred to her as the Princess of Wales. She could have said Catherine. Instead, intuition and admiration fused in the phrase, Queen Catherine. Within hours, the moment slipped into view beyond Windsor's walls. Palace scribes tried, gently, to manage narratives, noting in press summaries only that Camilla and Melania enjoyed a private literary tour of cultural treasures. But in today's world, discretion evaporates fast. Someone whispered, a guard spoke to a journalist, a lip reader scrutinized footage. Soon, social media platforms ran rampant with the line. On X, one influencer wrote, "She said it out loud. Queen Catherine." The post reached 50,000 shares within hours. TikTok edits merged Melania's words with video montages of Catherine's brightest moments, her laugh with William at Trooping the Color, her gentle greetings at children's hospitals, her waving at Christmas caroling services. Captions blazed, Queen in everything but crown. Traditional media could not resist. The tabloids ran with sensationalism. The Sun delivered Melania's mystery query, Queen Kate? The Daily Mail claimed, First Lady crowns Catherine with one slip. In the United States, the narrative was reframed. Fox News hailed it the compliment that crowned Kate early. CNN called it a symbol of the Windsor future, and the New York Times surveyed it soberly, saying it was an unplanned tribute to the monarchy's next chapter. What may have seemed transient gossip turned measurable almost overnight. Pollsters found Catherine's approval rating spiking to 85%, a staggering number for a royal figure. Among Britons under 30, often the group most skeptical of monarchy, 70% reported that Catherine was the figure they trusted most to represent the crown. Her authenticity, her journey through illness, and the fact that people asked about her even when she was absent only reinforced the impression that she was indispensable. Celebrity endorsements followed. Oprah Winfrey posted a photo of Catherine at a charity event captioned, "The Queen We Always Need." Actor Hugh Jackman praised her quiet courage. Priyanka Chopra, who had once been ambivalent about royal narratives, liked supportive tweets about Catherine. Even international leaders piled in. The Canadian Prime Minister referred to her as a model of dignity in difficulty. What began as 4 small words had crystallized into an unofficial coronation by popular sentiment. What of Queen Camilla? Remarkably, far from wounded by the phrasing, she emerged enhanced by how she handled it. Observers noted her smile, her softness in response, and her redirection into Victorian literature displays. Analysts praised her composure as queenly finesse. Palace insiders later said Camilla herself treated the matter with humor, not hurt. She even told friends, "It only shows Catherine is our future, and the world knows it." That remark, leaked carefully to reporters, calmed any suggestion of rivalry. Instead, it confirmed a monarchy comfortable being multi-generational, one queen guiding the present, one waiting for tomorrow. Perhaps the greatest brilliance of that day was Catherine's ability to gain stature without being in the room. Her choice to skip the tour was not weakness, it was wisdom. Observers nuanced their interpretations. Some admired her restraint, others her priorities, still others her courage to accept boundaries. What united them with clarity was the recognition that Catherine's absence was not emptiness. It was presence, magnified through longing, intensified through curiosity, affirmed by Melania's unguarded respect. The following morning, Windsor Castle woke to a storm not of weather, but of words. A single phrase, murmured in a library, had slipped beyond walls, beyond aids, beyond attempt at containment, and had taken on a life of its own. Where is Queen Catherine? Inside the palace. Within the palace, reactions were swift but discreet. Aides traded glances over breakfast briefings. Phone lines buzzed between Clarence House and Kensington Palace, message threads filled with strategies about wording and tone. How should the palace handle this? Emphasize Catherine's ongoing wellness, reinforce unity with Camilla, avoid fanning unnecessary speculation? Interestingly, the decision leaned toward subtlety. There would be no sharp correction about titles, no rebuke of protocol. Instead, Clarence House issued a short statement about warm interactions and meaningful exchanges during the visit, steering the spotlight onto cultural diplomacy. It was a masterclass in letting the moment breathe rather than stamping it out. Because truthfully, palace staff could feel the public pulse, and it was favorable. Melania's phrasing had not caused offense with the population. On the contrary, it was seen as admiration. Why fight it? Why scold the sentiment when it only amplified Catherine's popularity? Behind closed doors, there was even a flicker of amusement. One aide recalled that William had chuckled over dinner with Catherine, raising his glass in an unofficial toast to Queen Catherine, apparently ahead of schedule. That small joke radiated warmth, but it also revealed confidence. For William, the protective husband so closely attuned to his wife's strength and struggles, the phrase sounded less like error and more like validation. King Charles, measured as ever, was said to have nodded calmly when informed. He saw it as affirmation of his strategy to streamline the monarchy. For Charles, slimming down the royal family had always hinged on bright central figures, William and Catherine above all. Publicly seeing Catherine referred to as Queen, while still Princess of Wales, only underscored that transition plan was working. As for Camilla, far from bruised, she was praised even privately for her composure. Aides close to her noted how she brushed aside speculation with disarming humor. She confided to friends afterward, saying, "It highlights our greatest asset, Catherine." Those words, filtered deliberately into print a few days later, cemented that there was no rivalry narrative to spin. Instead, it became a story of mutual reinforcement, 2 queens in different phases, aligned rather than divided. For Catherine herself, the storm perhaps came as the strangest kind of gift. Her selective attendance that day had been born of wisdom, not optics. After months of treatments, energy management still mattered. Engagements were carefully chosen to maximize symbolism while minimizing strain. Appearing publicly outdoors earlier allowed photographs and laughter to radiate confidently. Avoiding hours of standing in the library shielded strength for other duties. Yet in that choice to skip, she gained an unintended advantage. Her absence became presence. Melania's question was essentially the world's, condensed into 4 words. Catherine's status, not just as Princess of Wales, but as future queen and already symbolic heart, had been voiced in the most unexpected forum of all. The insight for Catherine was profound. Presence does not always mean attendance. Relevance, in monarchy, now stretches beyond where the royal stands physically. Sometimes the most effective way to command notice is by trusting the absence to speak as loudly as presence. For Catherine, who values family and balance deeply, it validated what she already believed, that her reign, one day, would not be defined by unending appearances, but by carefully honed authenticity. Meanwhile, outside the palace, the chorus of voices continued to surge. Poll after poll confirmed Catherine as not just the monarchy's most admired figure, but one of the most respected public figures anywhere. 78% of Britons named her as the royal they trusted most. Across demographics that usually shrug at monarchy, especially younger age groups, admiration leaped upward. Among American respondents surveyed after the visit, a striking number also expressed warm regard for Catherine, proof that her star had transcended domestic borders. Celebrities carried her name further. Talk show hosts debated the moment with enthusiasm. Influencers compiled montages tagged #OurQueen. Comment threads swelled with fans across continents arguing playfully that the crown fits already. While critics pointed out the break in protocol, their voices drowned in laughter and affection. It was the softest, least controversial kind of storm. So, what does such a moment mean in the longer arc of monarchy? In truth, it reveals the evolving blueprint of survival. The Windsor dynasty, battered by crises across decades from abdications in the 1930s to divorces in the 1990s to scandals of the 2020s, now sits at a pivot point. Its ability to remain relevant depends on balancing ceremony with sincerity. Catherine embodies that synthesis. She wears tiaras, yes, but also posts candid photos of her children in jumpers among autumn leaves. She carries out charity visits in hospitals, not hiding fatigue, but sharing empathic words with patients. When she stood at the Royal Marsden earlier in the year, she made no attempt to disguise uncertainty. She admitted it openly, and in doing so made monarchy's greatest weapon not grandeur, but relatability. Melania's simple phrasing locked that reality into global consciousness. To her, Catherine felt less like a distant princess and more like a kindred spirit, a woman straddling roles of mother, public figure, partner, and survivor. And that, inadvertently, is how Catherine will likely define her future reign. She will not mimic past monarchs untouched by modern worlds, but instead reshape the role to mirror balance. Family first, duty always, humanity above all. This is why the phrase Queen Catherine resonated so powerfully. It was less about when a crown might formally pass, and more about how Catherine embodies the essence already. William's support remains at the heart of this. Palace leaks spoke of late-night conversations where the two balanced schedules, weighing every duty against family rhythms. For William, Catherine's strength is non-negotiable, her authenticity the very foundation of the monarchy's stability moving forward. Observers often remark that their partnership looks less like rigid roles and more like deliberate teamwork. That day's events reinforced it. Catherine had stood on green lawns earlier with Melania, engaging warmly, and William stood beside, protective yet unobtrusive. Later, when she skipped the indoor tour, William's quiet nod signaled, not hesitation, but approval. And when jokes were privately made over dinner about Melania's phrasing, he toasted not defensively, but with humor. Such small gestures speak of a monarchy that is no longer rigid performance, but family first. Catherine's future is clear. More than ever, she symbolizes a monarchy in transition, one that seeks to remain luminous while also sympathetic, ceremonial while still human. She is expected to spearhead initiatives in mental health for youth, environmental conservation, and cultural diplomacy with William in coming years. Each effort will carry the dual weight of official duty and personal sincerity. And if moments like September 2025 are any indication, even her absences will command headlines, such as her poll. For Catherine, the lesson is permanent. She does not need to chase the spotlight. The spotlight seeks her. So, what do we carry from this singular exchange? Windsor Castle returned to calm. The First Lady traveled home. The state visit files were closed in archives. Yet one whispered question remains alive in the public imagination. Where is Queen Catherine? The answer is that she is everywhere on the lips of visiting dignitaries, in the hearts of admirers, in the polls of approval, in the headlines of tabloids and broadsheets alike. She is etched not just in protocol, but in public affection. Which is why, in that library, amidst dust and gold leaf, Melania's words mattered. A visiting First Lady inadvertently uttered aloud the unspoken truth of millions. Catherine Middleton, Princess of Wales, is already perceived as queen. No ceremony required. And in that, the monarchy's future shines clearly. Relatable, resilient, balanced, human. The woman who once faced illness in front of the world continues to carry herself not only toward a crown, but toward trust a crown alone cannot command. So, friends, as Windsor's stone towers fade again into quiet routine, let us remember, in monarchy, every pause matters. Every absence tells a story. One absent princess in a library became the gravitational presence of an entire state visit. The crown may rest still on Charles and Camilla for now, but the echo of those 4 words makes plain what is to come. Catherine is not merely waiting, she is already reigning in the hearts of millions. Until next time, keep your eyes on the crown, because in palace corridors and quiet questions alike, history is always being rewritten.